On this episode of This Week in Linux, we celebrate an awesome milestone for both Red Hat and the Wine project, both reaching their 25th anniversary. Ubuntu announces a new minimal ISO for containers and the cloud. We take a look at some cool developments from the Nouveau project and Firefox. Malware was recently found in the Arch Linux Arch User Repository, or AUR, and we'll discuss some unfortunate news from the creator and founder of Python programming language. Later in the show, we'll check out some cool terminal applications, including a game to learn how to use Vim. All that and much more coming up. I'm Michael Tennell with TuxDigital, and it's your weekly source for Linux good news. Up first in the show this week is Red Hat celebrating their 25th anniversary. Now, this is awesome. And there's been quite a few things that they were talking about in the blog post, as well as the about pages they created for this. What they actually, this about page goes through like the things that Red Hat has gone through, based on the amount of time that any tech company exists. Most of the time they don't exist for that long. Like, it's very rare that a company actually exists for that long. So they're talking about how they've gone through the creation of open source, the .com boom. Going to the mobile era, and so much more, like cloud computing and stuff. Then they also have this blog post that goes more in depth about the history and experience of how Red Hat has gone through this, getting to that 25 years milestone. What's really interesting is that they mentioned that they've gone through 65 consecutive quarters of revenue growth, or basically 16 consecutive years, 16 plus consecutive years of growth, to the point where they now are worth $2.9 billion. So that's good. But anyway, congratulations to Red Hat, and thank you for putting all that effort for so many years to help improve the ecosystem and the community. And hope to see you for another 25 years and beyond. If you'd like to see some more content, check out the About page or the blog post. You can check the link in the show notes. Speaking of 25 years celebration, Wine is also 25 years old. July 4th, 1993 was the first release, or the 1.0 release, of Wine, or Wine is not an emulator, the Windows compatibility layer for Linux, so you can use Windows applications. And within the first year, Solitaire was available on Linux. And then Word and Excel stuff, but whatever. Solitaire. Important. I'm not sure exactly when Minesweeper came over, but anyway. What's interesting about this is that there wasn't really an announcement from the Wine team. I couldn't find anywhere like the Wine project was, making a big fuss about it. They totally should. You totally should. But it is fantastic, and everybody who hasn't tried Wine, you should definitely give it a shot, especially if you use something like the Wine bottles infrastructure or play on Linux. Give those a shot, because they can provide a lot of nice usability for different applications and stuff like that. But also, this week they released 3.12 of Wine. So this is more of an iterative improvement with like core fundamentals being improved. Like, for example, getting updates to Unicode with Unicode 11, incorporating a proxy configuration dialog, like 40 bug fixes that they had, including fixes for the cmd.exe, like Windows command interpreter, but also updates to the Wingdings font. So yeah, Wingdings and Wine, 25 years. Awesome. So congratulations to Wine for lasting as long as it has, and thank you for being so useful and being so, like such a great project to exist, and I appreciate it. And again, hopefully for more 25 years and more. This week, the founder and benevolent dictator of Python, Guido van Rossum, I think that's how you say it. I'm probably wrong. Sorry if I am. He's decided to step down as the benevolent dictator, and it's understandable that you might want to take a break in some cases. He's been doing it for so long that it's understandable you might want to, but his reasoning for it was pretty unfortunate, because it was due to a community. It was a pretty toxic discussion about PEP number 572, and PEP means Python Enhancement Proposal. So there was this proposal that was created to introduce a variable structure with expressions, and it kind of ended in a weird situation, like a pretty kind of volatile discussion and stuff like that. And his response to it was, like, he made a quote about in his announcement that he was stepping down, is that now that PEP 572 is done, I don't ever want to have to fight so hard for a PEP and find that so many people despise my decisions. That's a very strong situation there. He says, I've decided to remove myself entirely from the decision process. I'll still be there for a while, as an ordinary core developer, and I'll still be able to mentor people and things like that. But he says, I'm basically giving myself a permanent vacation from being the BDFL, which is a term that's benevolent dictator for life. Usually it's an open source term that implies the founder most of the time of a project. He did say also that he's not going to appoint a successor. He's going to leave that up to the Python core team to decide who's the successor as being the head of the project. So yeah, this is pretty interesting news. It's pretty unfortunate as well because he's the main driving force behind Python, and he's also, of course, the creator and founder of Python. And there's been a couple interviews that are really interesting about why he made it and things like that. So if you want to find out, I'll put a link to a couple of those in the show notes. But thanks for everything you've done, Guido or Mr. Rossum. Python's a fantastic programming language. I have to say that because I think Python is probably the best programming language for someone who's never programmed before to get used to actually learn how to program, and it's also a very powerful language at the same time. So I mean, it's a very fundamentally important language, and thank you very much for making it. Some malware was found in the Arch user repository, or the AUR, for Arch Linux. Now, the thing that happened was someone found an orphaned package. In this case, it was ArcoRead and a couple others like BALZ and MinerGate. These packages were just not maintained, which is an orphan package means it's a package that's in the repository but isn't maintained by anyone. So they took over control over maintaining it, but in doing so, they also added some malicious code to it. In this particular case, they added a script that would automatically download download and run another script from a remote site. And this would then take hardware information, like just basic info for the most case, but it would take hardware information that would be like CPU information and kernel you're using and things like that, and then it would put it into a paste bin. The interesting thing is that this was seemingly done by someone who's not very experienced because they put a private API key, which kind of implies, shows who they are and sort of thing. So they were able to find this fairly quickly and remove it. But just to be clear, the AUR is not tested and not vetted. So this is interesting because it's kind of surprising that it doesn't happen a lot more often. And even a trusted user, Razzolini, he's one of the developers of an Arch Linux maintainer, he said he's surprised that this type of silly package takeover and malware introduction doesn't happen more often. And I would have to agree with that because the AUR is not being maintained by anyone. It's not like being vetted by the actual Arch Linux project, and they specifically warn you to not use AUR helpers, not even to use the AUR unless you download the package builds and run them yourself manually. And they specifically don't give you access to the AUR as part of the core Arch Linux until you go through the process of learning what a package build is, how to make your own package build, and how to run them. So it's really interesting that this is getting a lot of attention, even though it's kind of like before you even use the AUR, they warn you that this is a possibility and maybe even a likelihood that this could happen. They also said, Razzolini said, this is why we insist users always download package builds from the AUR and expect it and build them themselves. When a helper does everything automatically for you, it makes it so the users don't really pay attention. And that's pretty much true because the helpers are designed so that you don't have to pay attention to what is being put into the package build, which creates this whole potential problem in the first place. So it's just an interesting situation where the AUR is one of the most talked about things for the Arch Linux community as being the most useful reason and one of the reasons why you would use Arch. But the Arch developers themselves are saying, like, yeah, maybe, think twice about what you use from the AUR. So this is just more like, I guess it's kind of a PSA sort of, but I don't. Anyway, it's definitely worth, checking into each time you try to install something from the AUR, because this sort of thing can happen. Just don't blindly install stuff. Make sure you know check the voting system, the comments, and see if there's people have been testing it and see if it's like good to go. And that's a good way to test, to gauge whether it's a solid developer or not. But anyway, if you would like to learn more, I have a link to the post from Sensors Tech Forum as well as the response from Razzolini in the show notes. Up next in the show, an infographic from Ubuntu was released. This was actually pretty interesting because in 2016 they released something similar, and it was kind of showing like how far has Ubuntu come since its creation. And now this is kind of like not necessarily a since the 2016 one, but sort of in conjunction with it, I guess. But then they just a couple days ago they released a new infographic that explains like how far Ubuntu has come and what it connects with, like basically essentially saying everything, which makes sense. There's a ton of stuff like Amazon's Deep Lens thing, Google's TensorFlow. Netflix uses Ubuntu in their infrastructure. They're massively involved in the autonomous car development from Intel, Samsung, etc. And like just the level that Ubuntu has reached is very impressive. I mean, we kind of already made an assumption because it's easy to make the assumption that Ubuntu is the most popular distro, but the how much popular it is it's hard to say. But this kind of information is good because I'm a data nerd, so I like to see this kind of stuff, especially if they put it in a infographic method. That's nice too. They said that 40% of Linux users that run IoT solutions use Ubuntu for that, using the Eclipse Developer Survey for reference of that. And it works with Kubernetes, Azure, with the Microsoft Azure platform, AWS platform, OpenStack stuff. Basically, Ubuntu is in so many pieces that in some way it does connect everything in the same way that Linux connects everything, because Linux is even farther than Ubuntu, but the fact that Ubuntu itself, just a single distro, is so important to so many projects is very cool. So if you want to see more about all the different projects and stuff that are included in this infographic, I have a link to that in the show notes. Ubuntu announced the Minimal Ubuntu release for public clouds and Docker Hub. This is for containers and cloud usage. This is the new Minimal Ubuntu ISO that you can use as a server or cloud infrastructure that you can very quickly build, create, and start up like a large scale of optimized cloud servers and doing specific tasks and things like that. So this new release is 50% the size of the standard Ubuntu server. The boot times have been optimized so it's 40% faster than our previous versions. And overall it's like a full Ubuntu stack distribution for cloud and server implementations, so that you can have like 100 or 200 servers that spin up very quickly to do a certain task, and then you just kill them again. So the boot times are actually very important because they're typically used in a very quick need type of situation. So you need 10 seconds or less to get something up. So you have like 100 that all go up at the same time, do something, and then you take them back down, like that kind of thing, which is pretty interesting because they're still working on making it even faster. Desktop users, who cares if you save like 3 seconds or whatever, but as far as like cloud deployment, it is kind of important. So it's interesting to see that Ubuntu is still working on this kind of thing. But there is one thing they need to work on. I don't know if it's really that important, but it definitely is something they need to consider. The name of this is terrible because it's Minimal Ubuntu. Not to be confused with the Minimal ISO of Ubuntu, or the Ubuntu Core minimal structure, or the Ubuntu desktop's minimal installation, you should come up with different words to describe these things, is what I'm saying. That would be very beneficial for marketing and people understanding what all this stuff is, because you use the same word for everything. It's not as easy. Anyway, just food for thought. So if you're interested in learning more about the minimal Ubuntu cloud server image, then check the link in the show notes. Next up in the show, this is really interesting news from the Nouveau team. There's been a new contributor to the project for past few months or so, and it's about 3 months roughly, and he's done quite a lot of work. So I just wanted to bring attention to it because the Nouveau drivers, are the open source NVIDIA drivers, or not NVIDIA drivers, but they're open source drivers for NVIDIA GPUs and stuff like that. So I think his name is Reese Perry. I'm sorry. I don't know how to say it, but it's something like that. And he's done a lot of stuff that's really interesting as far as like the fundamental core driver features of supporting OpenGL, various different things of OpenGL, like conservative restoration extensions, the ARB sample locations, and improving stuff for Maxwell components, as well as adding support for recently for for cycle count estimation of the NVC0 driver. That's fun to say, right? Anyway, suffice it to say that it's a very important, contributions to the Nouveau drivers, and I appreciate it very much, and just wanted to bring attention to it that, if you're wanting to contribute to the project, follow the lead of this contributor and maybe help the project grow and expand to maybe, someday not have to rely on NVIDIA. Well, other than the hardware itself, but not have to rely on their software drivers because, yeah. You can check a link in the show notes for some more information about the individual contributions he's made, things like that. Firefox recently announced new TestPilot experiments called Lockbox and Notes. If you're not aware of what TestPilot is a experimental kind of like beta program that Mozilla does where you can install custom add-ons and things like that, or even some services in some cases like Firefox or Mozilla Send, where you can test out new features that are potentially coming to Firefox, or just from Mozilla in general. For example, the container tabs that are very popular as far as current versions of Firefox, those first started as a TestPilot program add-on, and it's awesome. Container tabs are awesome, and I plan on doing a video about those, in the future, someday. Anyway, this particular announcement is for Firefox Lockbox, which is an interesting it's kind of weird in the way they've structured it, but it's to be able to sync your passwords from your various devices. Now, this applies to like if you're saving passwords in your Firefox browser, and also you can use them in your phone, but right now only for iOS users. So it's more like it's kind of a competitor to LastPass and things like that, but it's really just for iOS users, so I have no way to test it. So there's also Firefox Notes, which is like a competitor to Evernote sort of thing, and this one does have Android support. I still haven't tested it, but it does look interesting, and also the fact that it's encrypted end to end is really nice. You will need to have a Firefox Sync account in order to use these experiments, and that's why I haven't tested either. Well, one is because I don't have an iOS device, and the other one is because I don't have a Firefox Sync account. So that's why I haven't tested the other one. But I also really wanted to point out this one other feature, another TestPilot experiment that is really awesome. You should try it. I mean, it's not great for everybody. Not everybody needs this, but you should definitely check it out. And that other experiment is called Firefox Color. Now, this is an interesting way to customize the look and feel of your Firefox browser. Now, I have this custom theme that I created that's a nice dark theme, but it's also very subtle as far as the amount of color that it uses. Very little. You can kind of see it at the top right here, but not really, because it blends a little bit into the frame of the screen. But if you scroll down here, you can see all these different themes that you can choose from. Some of them are, nice and subtle. Some are very in your face. and there's some dark themes and things like that. Like overall, it's really cool because it's super simple to test out new different themes to easily change the look and feel of your Firefox without actually having to change any code or anything like that. And each one of these pieces, you can actually change the color and add textures and stuff. So let's say you want to have a different highlight for the color. You can just go in here, click that, and now you're done. And it creates the difference in just immediately, directly. So it's really cool. You can copy and paste and share the themes that you create, or you can click save and save that theme so that if you want to try out other themes, you can go back to whichever one you want. It's a really cool experiment, and I like it. It saves a lot of time and hassle with the whole dark theme approach. Like the issues of dark themes with Firefox has been apparent for a very long time, and this pretty much solves it entirely. So you can have a light theme on your Firefox, go in and change the colors with Firefox Color, and you now have a dark theme. So works pretty cool. If you haven't seen this before, go check out the TestPilot. I have a link to this one as well as the other ones in the show notes. Up next in the show is Browsh. I'm pretty sure it's how you say it, Browsh. It's a terminal or shell-based browser. It allows you to go to websites and check them out in a terminal or a text-based experience. Now, there's been quite a few text-based browsers in the past, but this one is actually really interesting because it actually uses modern technologies in the sense of HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, and etc. It even can support some videos, although the video stuff is a little awkward at times. It's sort of pixelated, so I'm not really sure why you'd want to do that, but it's interesting that you can. Now, the main purpose of this is to reduce bandwidth usage, so you can have much faster browsing, and also if you're in a situation where you have lower, if bandwidth is expensive and you have a data cap or something like that, this can be beneficial to you as well. What's interesting is that it uses Firefox rendering engine on the back end, so it's actually pretty cool for that. As far as I just think it's a really cool idea. Necessarily is that it's not really that, I don't know if it's that useful for most people, because it does pixelate everything that's not text. So while it does render images, it just renders them in weird boxy things. Anyway, it's kind of interesting to play with, and it does get the whole the full vibe of the full layout of a design. So it's got the most of the layout is preserved, but images are typically modified in a not so positive way. But wouldn't expect it to be in a terminal-based browser in the first place. So this is really cool, and if you want to learn more or try it out, you can go to the link in the show notes. Up next in the show is an interesting way to learn how to use Vim, and that is PacVim. PacVim is basically a game that teaches you how to use the Vim commands. Essentially, you're using, in a variety of different puzzle shapes and stuff, you use the Vim shortcut commands to move around the Pacman, which is the green character, to highlight each word that's in the game board while avoiding the ghosts or the characters in red. So it's an interesting way to learn Vim. So if you've ever been interested in trying out Vim, this might be a good way to try it out. I just thought it was just fun that it existed, and wanted to let you know about it. So there you go. You can find a link to their GitHub in the show notes. So a game I've been playing quite a lot recently is Ballistic Overkill. It is a fantastic independent first-person shooter game. It's kind of like a mix between Counter-Strike and Overwatch. So it's a class-based first-person shooter, and it's really fast-paced. It's definitely fun. It's like Overwatch fast-paced, but the realism structure of Counter-Strike. That's why I'm saying it's like a merge. It's a really fun game, and if you haven't tried it before, consider giving it a shot, especially because there's a new major update coming, which was going to bring a lot of new skins to the different characters, as well as a new game mode. They haven't really said what the game mode is going to be. There are some rumors that it's going to be capture the flag or like a battle royale type thing. I think it's probably going to be more of a class-based Overwatch mode sort of thing, so that you play a round, and currently if you play a round, you can pick whatever class you want. Whereas the class-based game mode would be there can only be one, 5 people or 6 people in the round per team, and only one person per class. So you couldn't have the same class being used multiple times. So it makes it more of a strategic structure instead of like people, always using the tank or always using the sniper or something like that. It's a really, I think that's where they're going to go with it. I don't know for sure, but that like makes the most sense as far as like the mechanics they already have in the game. But it's a really fun game, and if you're interested, you should come check it out. Play with me, because I'm not very good at the game. So if you've never played it, we'll probably be fine. And you can join the TuxDigital.com/Discord or DestinationLinux.org/Discord, where I play on both servers. So if you want to join that, or join the TuxDigital.com/Telegram group and message me if you want to play or something like that. Many kinds of options. If you want to play, just take a link in the show notes for the links to the different Discord servers and stuff like that. Finally, in the show, our friends at Gaming on Linux made a blog post that was really interesting. I wanted to bring up is that there's been multiple times we talked about the Linux users percentage on Steam, and we've talked about that and how it's problematic and flawed, and why the numbers don't really match up to reality and things like that. But they posted a really interesting article about the daily active users versus the percentage. And they were showing that if you look at the percentages of the usage, it looks like Linux is going down. The amount of users of Linux gamers are going down. But it's actually going up, because the majority of, while the percentage of the users is seemingly going down, there are more users being added both on Linux and on other platforms, which makes that seem like a smaller percentage. So if you look at the actual numbers, they showed that, based on the percentage and based on the amount they claim exists, the amount that Steam claims, they did some math and found out that it's roughly around 151,200 when it was at the 1.26% amount in Steam, but then it went down. The percentage is going down, but the actual users are going up. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, this is still, technically flawed data anyway, because the way the Steam user survey is broken, in the sense that they've only been allowing you the option to choose the preference of your platform for about 3 months or so, maybe even less than that, and they rarely ask Linux users if they're using Linux. So the numbers are still super skewed and absolutely flawed. But it's cool to look at it in a different perspective of, while the percentage is going down, the actual numbers are going up. And that's good, especially for developers, because they don't really care how many people are, what percentage of people are using, as long as they can get more people to use it. And that's a good sign. So if you're wanting to read more about this, or just any gaming, Linux gaming related topics, go check out gamingonlinux.com. And I'll link to the show notes for this direct article. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on the show, please like that smash button and be sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, we have multiple ways to do so, via PayPal, Patreon, and others. And if you'd like to learn more, you can go to TuxDigital.com/contribute. Or you can order the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt by going to TuxDigital.com/Linux is Everywhere. Or if you're in Europe, you could use TuxDigital.com/Linux is Everywhere EU. If you like some more podcasting goodness from me, then check out the latest episode of Destination Linux, as I'm a co-host of that show. Just a reminder, this show is live every Saturday, so join us in the live chat room to discuss all the latest Linux news each week. You can find the stream time by going to TuxDigital.com/thisweekinlinux. And scroll down to see the scheduled time, as well as the time zone converter to get the time for your region. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tennell with TuxDigital, and as always, keep using, learning, and enjoying Linux.